Is that what you?
Yeah, you can call me Keith or you can call me Phantom.
Uh,
Phantom's So this is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we've been talking, and this is an episode we're talking to Glenn Berger. He's a psychotherapist and coach. He's been involved in the music industry, some big names we're going to talk about. And welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Phantom.
Well, it's great to talk to people. We love talking to people who've been involved in music because that's kind of where we started the podcast. And so we might get a little obsessive about like music and creativity tonight.
I love
But
talking about music.
But a couple of questions we ask any guest before we get into the heart of your story is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Well, one thing I know is that there's a lot of pain in the world. A lot of young men are in retreat right now. They're into internet porn or online gambling or video games or weed or alcohol, and there's a lot of research on this. They're suffering a lot, so I want to relieve the suffering of the world. I've had a great life, and my passion right now is working with people and especially men to help them get unstuck and have the great life that they really deserve. And I think there's a lot of things about our system, about capitalism, that encourages addiction because that's
Yeah.
the way to make a lot of money. So my job is to make the world a better place and liberate the human spirit one person at a time. So that's my passion. That's what motivates me every day.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of problems I've noticed with in this age where men have kind of gone off the path
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they seem to not know how to get back on the path.
that's
Like
right.
whatever path you want to be, because I mean I'm a Buddhist, so but I'm not going to force anybody into what I believe. But the idea of just positivity, right? Not that you got to be positive all the time, but there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of like rage and anger
Yes,
I see in a lot of young men or
yes,
men in general. And I'm like,
yeah,
why? What are you so mad about?
yeah. You
What are you
know,
so upset about? About like I kept trying to understand it.
I understand a lot of that rage and a lot of that anger, and I came up in the 70s, and there were a lot of opportunities for a kid like me where I was able to come right out of high school and get a job at a great recording studio and work with extraordinary artists and producers and engineers, and those kinds of opportunities don't really exist anymore. I was able to move into Manhattan at 17 or 18 years of age. You can't do that anymore. No, you can't afford the rent. The
Yeah.
opportunities aren't really there. If you don't fall down certain very specific pathways, there's a lot of pressure for that. You're kind of lost. And so, I understand that anger when people feel like they don't have a shot.
Yeah, it seems like the system's been gamed into such a structured format. And being a
Yes.
child of the 70s myself, it seemed like less, I don't know, it's made the computer age, all these algorithms, all these people thinking they know everything. There was something Frank Zappa said.
Yeah.
Zappa said, like back in the old days, you get a guy smoking a cigar. He's like, I don't know what this is, but I'll give it a shot. Right. Something
Right.
like that. He's like, but now you got guys that think they know everything and then they don't let things through. So the gatekeepers, like, it's like, what would you get a Janis Joplin? Would you get a Hendrix? Would you get a Jim Morrison? People doing like 10-minute songs, people doing things that are against the canon. Like feedback was against the canon. Like you're not supposed to do feedback.
Right.
You're not supposed to
Right.
put it on the record, but Hendrix kind of forced it.
That's
He said
right.
it's going to be. But like people are so guided into lanes, into algorithms, into like, it's so to me, it's like I'm a child of the 70s. Like, why can't you go this way, that way? I'm all over the place.
Yeah, the financial pressures are so great. And back in those days, you could put out a record, Frank Zappa could put something out and something could break. Maybe it was on the third or the fourth album that he put out, and a label would invest in that because they knew that eventually something would break, and then you could make a lot of money. Now, I have friends who stuff is on streaming, and they'll post the check that they receive on Facebook or something. It'll be for 4 cents.
Before it
They'll
said,
have 7 million streams and they'll make 4 cents. So record companies are they don't want to invest in anybody because they're not going to make that return. Where in those days, like, I don't know what the kids are doing, but it seems to sell, so we'll put it out there.
Yeah, it
And
turned it
the
into a
artists had a
commodity.
lot more the artists had a
Yeah.
lot more influence and power than now, where everybody's kind of got to do it on their own. Just like you have your own rig behind you, and everybody does their own thing and tries to put it out there and cut through the noise, and it's really hard.
Yeah, it's like you can't get like, the college radio. I was a college radio kid
Yeah,
listening to like early REM replacements, who's could do bands like that.
yeah,
Even that, it's hard to break. Like I find bands all over the world. I
yeah,
find some band in New Zealand, some
yeah.
band in Australia, and I'll give them a shot on the show, talk to them. But it's like the industry does, MTV doesn't even show music, right?
No,
And then you have to find these underground, like the kids find underground things. Like my daughter's 25, she finds all this underground stuff
yeah,
because she's looking for it.
yeah,
And the kids kind of know where the buzz is.
yeah,
And that's kind of like the CBGBs is now in
yeah,
the net. Until you got to find that little space here or this like little fanzine or this little group here that's pushing something that will come out of nowhere because it's not reaching the public. It has to kind of metastasize to get to the
yeah,
public.
yeah, yeah. I had a feeling that things for music were gonna start going downhill after the invention of video games, because music just became less important. And now, so I was doing a session with a kid yesterday, and he was talking about brain rot. That he and it's so ubiquitous, it's everywhere, that he spends so many hours a day scrolling on TikTok, watching stupid garbage.
Yeah, cat videos.
I'll be careful. Oh, and way worse than cat videos. That's the nice stuff.
That's today. Well, I'm
And then
typing
and
nice
then at the end of the day, he can't concentrate. He can't focus,
overload.
and he feels like his brain has rotted during the day, and that's we would, I'm assuming when you talk about what you listen to, I couldn't wait for that album to come out.
Well, yeah,
And
album
then I
war.
went to the record store,
Record
and then
stores.
I
Yeah.
brought the album home and I listened to the whole thing, or I watched a movie from beginning to end, or I actually maybe even read a book, God
Yeah.
forbid.
It's been
And
more than 90,000 words.
right, right, and now so I think we have no idea how people's brains are being impacted by the consumption of
I think
media
the
and the way we
problem is the
consume it.
attention span is really low. I mean, I've talked to authors saying they can't produce 200,000 word books. They're being told
No,
to do 90,000, 70,000,
right,
and
maximum,
do three of them. So
right,
maybe a book was 200, 300, and they split it into
yeah,
three,
right,
right? Because the attention span is so slow. You can't write a song like I'm a big fan of like 7 minute, 14 minute like
yeah,
Genesis songs, like Pink Floyd songs,
right,
right? They take Yes songs that take the whole side of an album.
exactly. I
The
used to
kids
love that.
can't even get to that.
No,
They
no,
it's
no.
like, if it goes past a minute and a half, they're
Yeah,
done.
right,
It's like 30-second, 15-second. Like, how are you gonna, as a songwriter, it's like I just get started like a minute, 2 minutes in. It's really kicks in at like minute 4.5. It's like what? How are you supposed to do that? Well, you
yeah,
have to play live. You have to find ways to get out there, but
yeah,
you have to find ways to turn you sell a T-shirt instead of your record. You make more
right,
money on the T-shirt.
right.
But yeah, I mean, to stay out there today, the attention span is so slow, so low
Yeah, yeah,
that doing a podcast like this, long form, we do get an advantage because people want to hear people talk
right.
in an authentic way,
Yes,
and
yes.
that being authentic, I think, is the key to all the monotony and all the
Absolutely.
sameness. Yeah,
Absolutely. Just being real. Yeah. And that's a big part of why I created the course that I created, to help, because it to actually encourage people to do something on a daily basis. The only way that we get better, the only way that we grow, is if we practice. It's just like you being a musician. We used to talk about woodshedding. If you want to get good at something, you go in the woodshed for a couple of years and you
8,000
practice
hours.
your instrument, and then you get good at what you do, and you pay your dues. These were all ideas that we believed in, and it resulted in some great stuff. And so learning, now people have to learn how to actually concentrate and focus for more than 5 seconds at a time, and develop attributes within themselves so that they can go out in the world and achieve something, maybe make some great music or do something that whatever is true to them.
Well, you just to be an artist, you have to put the time in, you know?
You got to put the time in life.
Yeah, you can't ask.
If life is your artwork, that's what I consider that life is my artwork, and you got to you got to learn the rules. You got to learn how to what the rules of the game of life are. You got to practice them, and you got to get help and support from other people. You can't do it. You can't do it on your own.
Yeah, the idea that you can just be this individual all by yourself. Yeah, your band is you know, the group of people. If you're into sports, you know it's not just you,
That's
right?
right.
But if you're into sports, you know you got to put the practice in to get that 3-point shot. It
That's
doesn't
exactly
happen
right.
just because you want to think
No,
about
no, right.
it. You got to
Somebody
do it.
put me on if somebody put me on the golf course right now, and said, "Make that shot," I wouldn't know how to do it because I don't
Yeah,
know how to play, I don't know the rules, and I never practice.
yeah. I mean, I'm a mountain biker. Like to go down Killington in Vermont, you can't just think I'm going to do it the first
No,
time.
that no, no,
It's
no,
not going to happen. Well, you're going to end up in
right,
the hospital the first
right.
time. You don't know what you're doing. But, like you got to put that time in to be able to climb that hill and come down the hill. People
That's
would
right,
just want to skip and go down the hill.
right,
You
right.
need to practice going up the hill
Yeah,
before you go down the hill.
that's right,
People want to skip and do the ski lift,
that's
and
right.
then
You
they
wanna
get
skip
hurt, and
all
they
the
wonder why
steps.
they got hurt because
Right.
they didn't do the work.
That's it. Exactly right, exactly right.
But yeah, it just seems yeah, the idea that you got to get people out of their comfort zone. You know, it's kind of like Bowie. Bowie always said you got to be, you know, not that you have to tread water, but you got to get into something that's a little more like maybe not. It's not you. Maybe it's something different, and that's
Yes.
why he was like a change zone. You know, going
Oh,
from
yeah.
to the lad insane to then White Duke. He's like changing, and he didn't have. I mean, he could have stayed Ziggy the whole
Right,
time.
right,
And
right,
then he's like, but he didn't. You
how
know.
brilliant he was and what an inspiration he was to my generation, and getting out of your comfort zone. We people have a self definition, and very often and all too often people have a negative self definition, and they feel like they don't measure up as human beings, and we call that shame, where shame is the feeling that goes along with the belief that you don't measure up as a
Mhm.
human being. And then people, the stronger that feeling is, the more of a conviction it is. Oh, this is the way that I am, and I'll never be able to change. So you're right. You got to step out of that self definition and that comfort zone, and start cultivating a positive belief about yourself. You know, we're all amazing. The way that our bodies work is a miracle, right? And even being able to listen to a song or have a conversation is so miraculous. And we don't recognize that. You know, we take this thing for granted, and then we put it down, and all too often other people put us down, and then we believe that that's the truth about ourselves. And that's the those are the battles
It's
that we all need to fight.
like fear and safety. You know, what I've seen this common theme is like
Yeah,
you're afraid of everything and then you try to stay safe. Well, staying safe can keep you in a toxic workplace, can keep you in a
exactly right.
toxic relationship, and keep
That's
you in
right.
a toxic neighborhood.
Yeah,
Like you got to be able to get rid of that wolf at the door. You know, and I
right,
know like we human beings were built to kind of be scared of that real wolf,
right,
but we've
right.
kind of created all these other wolves. There aren't the physical wolf, and you got to get out of it.
Absolutely. You know, I think I kind of I agree with you that there was an evolutionary purpose or reinforcement. Probably the people who stayed in the cave who were anxious and said, "Don't go out of the cave." You know, they probably survived. The ones who left said, "What could happen?" They
Like that.
left the cave. They got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. They ate a poison mushroom. They died. So we tend to be an anxious species. And you're right. What we avoid because we're afraid, and generally we're afraid because of that shame, because we don't feel like we can handle
Mhm.
whatever the the object is. And again, if young people are not, um, if their lives are too soft, if they're not made to go out there
Yeah.
and fight the good fight and fail and pick
Feeling is
themselves
is
up.
the
And
whole
they
thing.
don't develop resilience. They don't develop that grit that's really necessary in order to thrive in the world. When I worked at A&R Studios back in the 70s, and I was mentored by Phil Ramone, one of the great
Oh, man.
producers of all
Awesome.
time,
Awesome.
he was tough. brutal. I mean, if somebody today got treated the way that I was treated by Ramon and the other engineers, I would sue them. This wouldn't exist in the world today. The assistant would say, "You're not allowed to treat me that way." If I said that, I'd get my ass would be on the street. I had to learn how to take it, and the reason was because we were working with the greatest artists in the world who were incredibly demanding. And if we had 40 musicians out in the room, and that at 1 o'clock, that would be very expensive if we went a second over. So Ramon had to know that he had that soldier next to him who was going to be able to handle whatever happened. So he was going to kick my butt to make sure that
get
I
you up to
was
speed. Well, you
that I
gotta
was
get
that I was up to speed,
yeah.
and that helped me develop that. There were could it have been different and better and toxic masculinity? Absolutely, it didn't have to be as brutal as it was, but still, there was something about that masculine environment that really, and developed a sense of pride. Like I knew that if Phil Ramone had, God forbid, had a heart attack and fell over, I'd
You
be
can
able
do
to
it.
sit in his chair and I'd be able to do the gig.
Well,
And then,
yeah, the problem, yeah, like you mentioned, it's like people, if you're too soft and like everybody wins, like I see like this culture now with kids, like
yeah,
they're playing games that everybody wins. But like you can't do that.
no,
But I've seen parents do that. When I
yes,
was with my kids,
yeah,
my daughter, and I see people's like, well, everybody's winning. It's like, well, how can
right,
everybody win?
right,
You got to teach people like as a musician, like you fail, right?
right,
You make mistakes, right?
right,
But it's an opportunity.
right,
Like I knew guys like if they couldn't get it, then they just dropped they wouldn't pick up the guitar again.
right,
But it's
right.
like you got to be able to handle the fact that a lot, the 100 of your demos aren't going anywhere, right?
That's
A
right.
thousand might not go anywhere,
That's right.
right? That
That's
that
right.
until the right thing comes together, and that's just over time. You just learn that. The writers know that they how much stuff is on the cutting room floor. Talk to directors and film.
Yes.
Every artist has a bunch of stuff sitting in their loft they never brought to the gallery,
Right.
because they had to get it up to a certain level.
That's right. That's right. And that every every work that you do is an experiment, and not every experiment succeeds. And don't see it as a failure. See it as an opportunity for growth and learning. And then you do the next one, and you get it. You get it better, and you keep pursuing it. And I think that that's part of that Taoist process, right? Where it's not about the destination, it's about the
Getting
process.
there. Yeah, it's like Jack Kerouac on the
Mm.
road. You gotta go experience life. You might get kicked in the face, make you kicked in
Right.
the teeth, but you gotta
Yeah.
go through it, and actually deal with that disappointment. Because like every artist, right?
Yeah.
If you listen to like James Taylor, like I seen fire, I seen rain, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you go through something and then you relay it, that
Yes.
really connects. Like when
That's
he
what
was
moves
happy,
people. Yeah.
he had some songs that when he was happy, nobody remembers them.
Right. Exactly. Why do you write the sad songs? Because people like them better. And you talk about gathering experience. The first album that I engineered on my own was a tuba quartet. And some tuba player, this guy Tony Price, lovely man, studio musician. These guys, unfortunately, tuba players, they usually were relegated to playing umpa in the circus, just boom, 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 boom,
Yeah, in the
boom.
back.
They didn't really get a chance to play. So these four guys decided they were going to make an album, tuba quartet, and they did some very avant-garde stuff. I know you love avant-garde stuff. You'd love this thing. I
Mhm.
named the album. I called it Tubby's Revenge. And we snuck into the studio. This was kind of allowed when a guy was coming up like me, an assistant engineer, in order to get your chops together. The management looked the other way when we would sneak into the studio on the weekends.
Work
This is
on
a
stuff.
great studio. In fact, if you did you see the Dylan movie that just
I
came out?
I haven't seen it yet, but my friend has seen it. I wanna
Well,
go.
one of the things that was so I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. One of the things that blew my mind was that they replicated the studio where I worked.
Oh, wow.
Uh, it was originally Columbia's studio at
Columbia, yeah.
799 7th Avenue in on 52nd Street in Manhattan, and Phil Ramone bought it and turned it into A&R Studios and Studio A1. They replicated that studio
exactly.
exactly the way that it was. And that building is no longer there. Now it's
Wow.
a equitable insurance company. They just tore the whole thing down. So when I saw that, I was amazed. So I would sneak into A1 with the tuba quartet, and we do their wild music. And one day, one of the players, Sam Palafian, said, "I got a gig over at Carnegie Hall. You want to come with me?" I said, "Of course." So friend and I, and Sam, she's got the tuba. It's winter. We run over to Carnegie Hall. It's PDQ Bach. Do you know PDQ Bach?
No, no, no.
PDQ Bach was a classical music comedy act. This guy Richard Schickele did the funniest stuff on classical music. So we run through backstage at Carnegie Hall, and it's all these men in tutus and people playing kazoos and all kinds of wild stuff. I go to the edge of the stage. Sam rips off his coat, puts on a motorcycle helmet, goes out on stage, stands on his head, and plays the tuba. That was his shtick, right? Does that for 3 minutes, comes off the stage. We put our coats back on. We run out and leave Carnegie Hall. This is like a life memory. This is an incredible experience that I got to have in my life, that I got to go backstage at Carnegie Hall through these lunatics and see the guy play tuba on his head. This is what I encourage young men to do. Have experiences,
Yeah,
do
be out there.
crazy stuff. It will hold. You'll be able to talk about it 50 years later when you're on a podcast.
It's kind of like you went to a story there, but like you have a book, say never say no to a rock star
Yes,
in the studio with Dylan, Sinatra, Jagger, and more.
yes,
And like to get some like people, yeah, that's the book. And we were talking before we got on air about Dylan.
yeah,
I'm a Dylan fanatic, kind of like
yes,
Hendrix was a Dylan fanatic. If you wasn't watching any documentaries, like he was telling his girlfriend about it, and she wasn't like getting it. It's like, why do you like him? It's
yeah,
like you don't see it, you don't hear it. It's like
yeah,
it's like I kind of like that. It's like I hear those lyrics. I see the
yeah,
blonde on blonde and Highway 61. Hurricane, Idiot Wind. I was like, oh my god. With the
yes,
band, I got the
yeah,
9 hours of this stuff with the band at Big Pink. Um,
right.
and that stuff is just
Really
like to
great stuff.
me, if you're a band trying to learn how to play, listen to the basement tapes.
Yeah,
Like listen to that. There's like listen how he thinks, how he
yes,
works with Robbie and the boys. Is like that's
yes.
that's the way you should work.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Yeah, so I was working with Ramon, and so this was what, 1975, when I was 19 years old, and well, I would go over to the book where you'd see who was coming into the studio, and I see that Bob Dylan has booked some session time, and I'm going to be the assistant engineer on those sessions. So that was an exciting thing. In fact, that was such a crazy week that we were working with uh, Mick Jagger during the day and Bob Dylan at night.
Oh man,
Like that's the way things used to be, right?
that's awesome.
We were remixing a live. We were doing a live broadcast. The Stones had recorded some stuff in Brussels in 1974, and we were going to do a radio broadcast of that. So we were remixing that. That's
Mm.
another story. And so, Dylan comes in, and we were told in advance that do not talk to Dylan. Do not interact with him. And he kind of hung out in
No
the
small
corner.
talk.
No small talk. He goes out in the studio, and there I am setting up the mic, and he's got his harmonica holder on and his guitar and his vest and his curly hair, and there's Dylan. Oh my god. Right. And he starts and he asked Phil to find a band for him. So Phil brought in what was the Deliverance band,
Hmm.
Eric Weisberg and Tony Brown and Richard Crooks, um and Dylan says, "Okay, we're going to do Tangled Up in Blue." He doesn't even run the song down. It doesn't tell him the chord changes. When you're doing head arrangements in the studio, the artist doesn't always tell people what to play, but you
Yeah,
got to give the musicians an opportunity to learn the song to come up with the right parts. So
yeah.
he plays let's say Tangled Up in Blue. He does that maybe once or twice. The guys are just figuring out what it is. And then without telling anybody,
Went
he
right to
just plays a different song. He starts Simple Twist of Fate, right? And the guys are like, wait a minute, these are not the chords. What is this, right? So the guys are stumbling around, and then Dylan says to each musician, okay, you drop out. Nope, I don't want that guy. So he's like fires everybody on the spot and ends up playing. And then you know, we were talking before about how a guy like Paul Simon, who I was working with at the time, he would take a year and a half to make an album.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Dylan recorded the whole thing in a day. Then he came in the next day and re-recorded the whole thing again, right? And he played most of the album with Tony Brown, the bass player, who sat and watched Dylan's hands to figure out what chords he was going to play. And the tuning on Dylan's guitar was not the standard tuning. So Tony had to figure out what the tuning was and follow him, right? And those, but as you said before, these were very raw, emotional tracks.
Yeah.
So he's, you know, and I'm in the control room and I'm looking through the window and there's Dylan playing Idiot when nobody's ever heard this song before, right? This is fresh.
Fresh,
Right?
yeah. First time you heard it,
And I'm thinking, oh my, this is so amazing. This is so raw, and the emotions are so deep. You know, it's a wonder that you still know how to breathe. And
yeah.
And the whole thing ends, and then Dylan turns to us in the control room and he says, "Was that sincere enough?" I didn't know what to make of it as a 19-year-old kid. Like, we've had a lot of conversations about what Dylan meant when he said that sentence.
What does he mean? Yeah.
But
Well,
it
he seems
really
like he
was.
wants to be a little difficult, maybe to be difficult.
Oh yeah, he, you know, he was. I've and most of the people that I worked with in the studio, they of course super talented, Steely Dan, Paul Simon, whoever it was. But I didn't see them really have like flights of genius. What I saw from them was perseverance, was dogged work, doing it over and over again until they got it right. Not Dylan. Dylan was the only one that I saw that really seemed like he was a genius. He was tapped in. The stuff would just, like, I saw him write a song like he was taking dictation.
Mm-hmm.
You
Kind of
know,
flow state. You get that flow state, kind of just getting it from the muse.
Whoa, from the
right there.
muse, right connected. And then take two, but different lyrics than take one. His stuff was just flowing out of him. So he wasn't, he did it. And I was trying to learn how do you make art, right? I'm a kid. I want to learn. So, Paul Simon, okay, you got to do it this way. Then Dylan comes in and he does it
totally
180 degrees the opposite way. I really did not know what to make
of it.
Right.
Yeah, I've always been very impressed with people who do that kind of flow state in the moment, kind of like improvisation in a moment, and then they can put down like multiple versions of a song, and then just, like, all of them are good. Because I used to listen to like Hendrix solos.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he put down like, I'm a crazy Hendrix fanatic.
Yeah.
I'm listening to all these variations of solos that he would have for these classic songs.
Right.
Well, all of them were good. Like, why did he pick this? And it was kind of like he knew what he wanted in terms of feel or emotion, and he said, well, that one works because that's where my head's at.
Yeah.
That's where my heart's at.
Right.
But, you know, and that changed, you know, when he goes to play it on stage, it wasn't always the same way.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Those guys, and the whatever they were hearing and persevering, you know, whatever they were going after, and I wouldn't know what it was, and it took a lot of stamina. You know, again, if I would be ready to go home and say, like, what are you looking for? You know, it's good enough. But no, the artist was pursuing something. They heard something in their head that they could never quite capture, but they never stopped going after it. And I think that they only stopped when the deadline hit, you know, when they couldn't do any more. You know, I worked with Bob Fosse on the film All That Jazz, and he was an incredible artist, an incredible taskmaster. He would sit when we were doing the re-recording, mixing the music with the dialogue and the sound effects, which I was blessed to participate in. He would sit an inch from the screen. This was in the analog days. And he'd
Mhm.
say, take out one frame. That's 1/30th of a second.
God, you
And
take
then
out
he'd
one
say,
frame.
no, put it
No
back in.
computer.
And then he'd say, take out 2 frames. Nah, put it back in. And this meant you had to take the, now it's, you press a button and you could do
Yeah,
that in
yeah,
half
but
a
you had
second.
to
Then
cut it right.
you had to take the film off, you had to cut it with a razor blade, you had to put it back together with tape, you had to put it back on the machine, you had to sync it up, you had
Yeah,
to run it.
that's hard work.
It was hard work, but that was, again, he was, he
You knew what he
saw
wanted.
something. He was
Yeah,
looking for this feeling. He was looking for more than it wasn't perfection. He was looking for an impact. You know,
yeah.
how the audience was going to be moved, how he was going to create that emotion.
As an engineer, like a lot of people may not understand like the dynamics between like what you put down in real time
Yeah.
and then what you can do with the soundboard and what you can do and how you could kind of go back and color it in different ways.
Yes.
Different
Yes.
techniques from effect processors and vocal processors, all the processors that you could run back in the day, and even today you have tons of them. But the fact that you guys are actually dealing with analog, right? And you
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
deal with tape and being able to take a razor and cut something and physically having like circuits that are like, transistor based circuits rather than all this digital stuff.
Yes, and it meant that there were a lot of technical problems along the way. But I think one of the reasons that music today is a kind of sterile or only has a certain range of emotion is because since everything is computerized, everything is replicated exactly as it was the previous time. But when we were doing mixes that were not computerized, it was artisanal, and maybe on that one take something would happen. You wouldn't even be able to define what it was, the balance between the instruments,
Oh,
or the amount of reverb on something, or something would change and something would lock in, and suddenly it was magic.
yeah.
Right? And you say that's the take because it had a feeling to it, and you couldn't necessarily replicate that.
Well,
Sometimes
that's
I get calls from people, and they who are attempting to, for whatever reason, replicate what happened in the studio at that for a particular song or session, and they'll say, so how'd you get that thing? I don't know. It was the humidity of that day. It was that microphone that might have had a little problem to it. It was the vibe.
some
You
of that
can't.
stuff. It's analog. If it's like my Moog, it acts different when you first turn it on. It warms up. So
Exactly.
some of that transistor stuff,
Yeah.
like if it's on for a couple hours, it's not going to behave the same way as when you just turn it on.
Right.
And
Right.
then there's like things that like glitches, like things that happen, like the CP3 mixer on a Moog, like
Yeah.
you can blow it up, and there's stuff like the Ray Davies and the Kinks, they use a broken amp, to get
Exactly.
that sound. It's like some things are, and there's microtonal things, right?
Right.
There's like little like timing errors because if you have a real drummer
Yeah.
that's actually playing like, I think about like a Keith Moon or a
Yeah.
Mitch Mitchell.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah. Yeah.
listen, sometimes it's not exactly the way
Right.
things are today with somebody's using an
Right.
808 or a
Yeah.
Lynn drum or a 727 or
Yeah.
whatever they're using. It's like it's not gonna be totally on the bar
That's
perfect.
right. Right.
And you don't want it to be. Like, why would I'd rather have a Percy Shuffle or a Mitch Mitchell
Yeah.
or any of the drummers and have like, hey, well, yeah, I can't track to that. Like, wow, how can you not track to that?
Right.
That
It's
that's what
it's
that's what
it's
it
all
should
about
be.
it's about the feel. It's about the feel, and you can't quantize the feel. You can't put it into a machine and make that machine feel the way that human beings feel when they're playing together.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
magic,
yeah.
it's like 'cause you have these things like we have, like, unintended happy accidents.
Exactly. That's the thing that I'm talking about with the mixes. It's a happy accident, and sometimes something would happen in the studio when we were working with Simon, uh, and he'd say, "Well, save that." Somebody would. It would just be some random thing on the tape, and then that would end up in the record. Because that
Yeah.
that was
Sometimes if your microphone position wasn't the best,
right.
right? or you actually want to use a better mic, but the
Yeah.
vocal delivery you gave on the mic you don't think is as good
Right.
is
Yeah.
actually better than anything you do on the better mic.
That's right. That's
So
right.
then it's like I'll keep the one that it was supposedly a lesser quality version. It actually has more impact.
Right. Right.
Okay, it
Exactly.
depends on like how you mic the drums or what you did. You know, there's so many different variables of what you can do. But when you're actually taking real instruments, or you're taking like a Hammond organ,
Yes.
or somebody's using a real piano,
Yeah.
you're using a mini Moog versus using a plug-in of a
Right.
mini Moog.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but the real mini Moog, I can hear it. And
Right.
people say, "Well, you can't hear it." Like I can. I'm sorry.
Right. Right. And
There's something about it.
yeah, and just to bring it back to people again, that we want to, as you were saying, what we're looking for and what we really respond to is authenticity. And in relationships right now, people are so afraid to be real. They're afraid they're going to be rejected if they're real, or there are pressures in the world today in terms of being canceled and those
Or
kinds
hating.
of
Yeah,
things.
the haters.
But people really crave connection. They really crave what's real. So I run a group, part of my Heart Finders course on Saturday mornings. I run a men's group, and and it takes a while for men to open up and communicate and be real and authentic with each other. Everybody's struggling, everybody's suffering in their way, everybody has their pain, and everybody is aspiring to be their best selves. We have our feet in the mud and our eyes are on the stars. We're all aspirational beings, and it's so important that men are there with and for and supporting each other, especially today, because there is so little authenticity. Everybody's airbrushing
Yeah.
themselves on social media and presenting this persona, and then everybody else feels inadequate, that they don't measure up to what they're comparing themselves to.
Mhm.
And we need more of that authenticity in the world, in every aspect of life, not just in music, but in relationships as well.
Yeah, I think that kinda goes toward the idea of, like, the 6 attributes of, like, a heart: self-compassion, courage, strength, imagination, wisdom, and love. I think a lot of men, they put up this front. You got a
Yes.
mask on, they got
Yes.
the armor on, and they're, like, too tough to be true.
Yeah.
Like, how's that? It's like, you can't be that tough. It's like you gotta let it guard down somewhere.
Yeah, I did some therapy with the inmates at the Westchester County Jail many, many years ago, and these men were in a lot of pain. They were mostly mentally ill, chemically addicted. We call it MICAs, and the prison was just the revolving door, because they had no place else to go, and because our society doesn't support these struggling people. And I would sit with an inmate in this horrible jail, and we did some deep work, and each one would reveal their pain to me, and I would say to them, have you ever talked to any of the other inmates about what you're going through? Because I knew they were all going through the same thing, because they were all talking to me, right?
Mhm.
And they would say, oh, no, 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 you never ever
Let your
reveal
guard
that
down.
to somebody else. So they all played tough guy out, in the hallway, but when they were in my room, they were crying, crying boys. And it's just a shame. Now, when you talk about those 6 attributes, what I notice is that for people who are stuck in their lives, they generally have 6 uh, challenges that they face. So the first one is this thing called shame, right? That they don't believe that they measure up as human beings. So what they need to do is to develop self-compassion. That people believe that unless you're beating yourself up, you're not going to do anything. That doesn't help. It doesn't work.
Mhm.
So they have to learn how to be patient with themselves. Things grow at an organic rate. The second attribute that I see that people struggle with when they're stuck is they're afraid, as you talked about before. They're consumed with fear, and they're usually afraid of the wrong things. People who are afraid of doing something, they should be afraid of not doing something. Uh, But our body reacts as if we're in danger when we're not really in danger. So you have to develop the attribute of courage. Courage is the ability to do the scary thing. Courage is not the absence of fear; it's acting in the face of fear.
Mhm.
The third thing that I see that stuck people struggle with is what I call strength. They get stuck in bad habits. Again, as we were talking about internet porn, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. So they need to develop strength, which is the habit of being able to change your habits. And that takes work. Each one of these things takes daily work. The fourth one is imagination. Most people have a negative imagination. They think nothing is ever going to work out for them, that there's no point in doing anything. They don't have to work on negative imagination because it happens automatically and habitually. So you have to visualize, you have to cultivate positive faith that things are going to work out for you, that there's a possibility of a positive future. Again, that takes effort. The fifth one is wisdom. It seems like people today, people who are stuck, are afraid of learning. Somehow
Mhm.
schools have really screwed things up because instead of encouraging people to love learning, it makes people feel like they're stupid, they can't learn, or learning is a drag, when learning is one of the great joys of life. And that's the way that we grow. How are you going to grow, again, if you don't learn the
Yeah,
laws
I
of
think
reality, the instruction manual of life? So uh, when you you need to develop the attribute of wisdom. And the last one is love, self-love. How can you love anybody else unless you love yourself? And love is, when you treat something with reverence, it's going to work the best. Robert Pirsig wrote a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I don't know if you ever read it, but basically he says if you want a great motorcycle, you talk about what you do on Killington, right? You got to know how the motorcycle works, and you got to take good care of it. And if you do those two things, you're going to have the best possible motorcycle. And when you're going down the mountain, you can trust that you're going to be able to get down that mountain. So if you don't treat yourself with, and again, people who are stuck, they treat themselves terribly. They eat badly. They don't get proper sleep. They put crap into their bodies. How do they expect this thing to work right, your brain to work right, unless you're treating it with love? And so you need to develop that sixth attribute, which is self-love. And those are what I call the attributes of the heart. And if you are willing to devote yourself on a daily basis, 5 to 20 minutes on developing these attributes, then you can get unstuck and you can get everything you want in life. And you can feel great about yourself and you can find purpose.
yeah, I think a lot of people get their dreams kind of knocked down because they're always trying to keep up with the Joneses. And when I love, yeah,
Comparison is a
and I
nightmare.
and I always liked about the punk aesthetic, where like Ramones and stuff showed up, is then a lot of generation of like when I was growing up as a kid in the '70s, seeing all these punk and new wave, new age bands showing up
Yeah,
and say, well, I don't have to sing like Robert Plant. I
right,
don't have to sing like Marvin Gaye.
right,
I could be like Joe Strummer. I could
right.
be like Joey Ramone. I
Yeah,
could go out there and just
do
sing,
it.
do it. And
Yes,
even if the haters say, "Well, your voice is no good," it's like, "What do you
yeah,
mean?" I mean,
right.
I love Dylan, and people argue about his voice. I think his voice is awesome,
Yeah,
but there are other people saying, "Well, he don't sound like Sinatra." It's like, "Well, no, he
right,
doesn't, but
right.
he's not supposed to sound like Sinatra.
He
He
loves
sounds
Sinatra, but he doesn't have to sound like him.
he doesn't have to sound like him. He has a brilliant voice,
Right.
many different versions of it, from the
Yes.
Nashville skyline to the kinda, Tangled Up in Blue,
Yeah.
Blonde on Blonde, Highway 61, kinda Arthur Guthrie, Woody Guthrie
Yeah.
inspired vocal to, like, his own unique kinda nasal
Yeah.
focused kinda character. But, yeah, just like you can be yourself,
Yes. Right.
and there's nothing wrong with, because you put something out against the wall, you throw it at the wall, right? Look,
Yes.
like an indie
Right.
in the indie college radio age.
Yeah.
Like Michael Stipe of REM. Early REM, you didn't know what he was saying,
Yeah.
and that was kinda like the mystery and magic of it.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
a guy out there, and I don't know exactly what he's saying, I kinda
Right.
imagine what he was saying, and I
Yeah.
thought it was cool. And
Yeah.
then when I actually heard what he was saying, I was like, it's different than what I expected, and I kinda like the older version, but I
Yeah.
didn't know what he was saying.
And that's the courage part, right? The courage to put yourself out there and to be yourself and to let yourself be seen and to take that risk. And who cares? We're all going to be dead soon anyway. So what is there to really be scared of? And I think the artists that you're talking about were an inspiration to so many people because they gave them permission to be yourself.
Yeah,
Right.
they get all these women artists now, the Liz Fairs and,
Yeah.
the L7s and all these, like, female rockers and punk rockers and, having their say. And
Right.
I spent a lot of time talking to female singer-songwriters because they weren't really being pushed up because
Yeah.
the other voices were always out there.
Right.
And it's like any voice that's not being heard is cool to kind of come up from the underground and realize, like, yeah, you can go do it. And that's why you have a lot of these people doing it yourself. And we have tons of people uploading music. Maybe it's not getting heard, but they realize
Right there.
there's
Yes.
something about, like, cathartic about
Yeah.
being an artist,
Yeah.
whether you're a painter or you're doing it with acting or any kind of art. It's important to believe that you can do it. You don't have to be Michelangelo. You don't have to be Shakespeare, to write a
Yeah.
book.
That's right.
But some people think you have to be a certain level or they can't even do it.
Right. Yeah. Do you know that a letter from Martha Graham to Agnes DeMille?
Mhm.
So, Martha Graham invented modern dance. Agnes DeMille was a student who was a very famous choreographer in the 40s. And Agnes DeMille writes to her teacher, Martha Graham, and says, I suck. Right. And Martha Graham writes back and says, there is only one of you in all time, and your expression is unique. And if you don't put it out there, it will not exist in any other form at any time. So it's not for you to judge whether you're good or bad. It's just your job to put your
Stamp.
thing out there, is to express, is to keep the channel open. And she says, my favorite line of the letter is, she says, for an artist, there is no satisfaction whatsoever at any time. There's only a queer divine dissatisfaction that keeps the artist searching.
Yeah, that's why you keep on doing it. Like,
And
you
that's what
don't
you can
stop.
do. Right.
Yeah, because that's the point. Like, to me, if it becomes like you're phoning it in,
Yeah.
then you ought to give it up because, like, then you're
Right.
not really into it,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
but if you're still passionate, like, you're still writing to the end, like Johnny Cash,
Yeah.
he was writing to the end,
Yeah.
still doing it because he felt it. He
Yeah.
was the man in black.
Right.
He
Yeah.
was that.
Yeah.
He's doing it. It's like,
Right.
why? Like, there's no age limit on that.
No, no, no.
He's like,
We used to make a joke and say close enough for rock and roll, which meant, it's fine the way it is. But for the artists that I work with, it was never close enough for rock and roll. It was passion. It was passion, and it was and that's what came across in those recordings. When I worked on I was just talking about this the other day. I witnessed the recording of Kid Charlemagne on the Steely Dan
oh,
album
Steely.
Royal Scam. And we worked on that basic track, just the rhythm track, for probably about 12 hours,
Wow.
and used a lot of reels of 2-inch tape, which was very expensive. And when I listened back the next day, in fact, I think I have a reel-to-reel recording in my attic of the basic track. When I listened to that track the next day, it was burning. There was nothing that was as hot as that track. That's when they were going after something and they got it. And it
Thank
was,
God.
and so for something to have the impact on, whether it's vinyl or cassette or now on our phone or however you listen to stuff, for it to have the impact that it has, it's got to be really, really hot when you're in the studio. And it's kind of like a burning coal. We would first cut that thing, it was the power of that thing was just absolutely
Yeah,
extraordinary.
when you got that, you're in that groove. Like, if you
Yeah.
got, you've got that, it's gonna draw you in when you got
Oh
it.
yeah.
Like, with, like, a James Brown when
Oh
this
yeah.
band, it was like you knew he had it or he didn't.
Right. Right.
You can hear the tapes of him saying, like, "Nope, that's not it,
Right.
Maceo. That's nope, that's not it.
Right.
Like, you don't got it." Then, like, when he told Maceo he had it, then he had it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you
Yeah.
know you
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. The very when I got the internship at A&R, and they just, and again, this was the incredible thing. It's like, oh yeah, go hang out in that control room and just don't say anything, just keep your mouth shut, sit in the corner. So I walk in the control room, and who is it? It's James Brown,
Oh,
right?
wow, you got to see him. Oh my god.
And he's got his coterie of people around him, and he's kind of doing his political speeches and stuff. And then he gets out in the studio. The music was so loud. for my very first day in the studio, I didn't think I was going to be able to survive that kick and snare. That
Mhm.
kick would kick me in the chest, and the
Oh, yeah,
snare
of
would
course.
smack me in the head.
It was
But it was, it was a groove. It was a groove.
yeah. There's something about being around that kind of dynamic situation that you get kind of drawn in, that's
Oh
why
yeah,
why musicians we get drawn into it and why like we don't get paid for a long time,
right.
but we get
Yeah.
drawn into it just because of the passion of it.
Oh yeah,
There's
yeah.
something about when you're actually, there with your drummer, there
Oh
with your
yeah,
sax player,
yeah.
and you're actually putting it down
Right,
and you know that you locked in
right. Oh
and you
yeah,
know you've got something. It's like there's nothing, it's like I don't care. It's like I'm not even in front of the crowd yet.
yeah.
And you know you got something that's big. Like it's so worth so much that some people don't get,
Right.
that.
Yeah,
Maybe you get that now when you're in your DAW,
yeah.
but it doesn't feel that way to me.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah,
Maybe you can. I mean, I guess you
yeah,
can because there's people that do, but I'm like, I
yeah.
do it a different way.
And a part of it is no matter how hard it is, people, there's so much financial pressure that you got to figure out how to make money, or you go into finance or consulting or law. And then I work with people who are in those fields and they're really miserable because they don't know who they are and they never pursued their dream.
Mhm.
So I have those memories. I had those extraordinary experiences because I pursued my dream, and nobody can ever take that away from me. And it's amazing. Who knew? Who thought 50 years ago? This is the 50th anniversary of the release of Blood on the Tracks. Was a couple of days ago. Did I
Yeah.
think 50 years ago that 50 years later I'd be talking about that and people would be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the release of that album, which many people consider to be the greatest album ever? Did I know that? I had no idea. I mean, I knew Bob Dylan. I knew that was extraordinary, but none of us thought that we'd be listening to it 50 years later. I would have stolen some stuff from that session if I would have known that.
When you're in that magic time, and they were talking about, Steely Dan. Is like they're some of heroes of mine because I love everything they've ever
Really?
done. But
Yeah.
like, the Idiot Wind Tangled Up in Blue in the session you were involved in. I love that session. I actually have like the bootleg archive set, and I
Yeah.
actually prefer it to the released album
Yeah.
because that
And
is my kind of sensibilities. I like
yeah.
stuff when it's raw,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
feel like it's more. Like it feels like maybe it just connects to me because it feels super authentic. Like it
Yes.
feels like yeah, that's like it really is getting across to me.
Yeah.
And maybe the other version is you got to pretty it up,
Yeah.
and it comes across in a different way. But there's
Yeah.
something about that version you worked on that
Yeah, I
like
felt that way. I felt that way also. And after we finished it very quickly, and so that was in September. And every once in a while, the phone would ring. We were working. I don't remember what we were working on. Maybe Judy Collins' album, probably "Send in the Clowns." I think that was probably. And the phone would ring, and Phil would pick up the phone, and it would be Dylan. And I'd hear Phil saying, "No, no, Bob, it's great. No, really. I mean, Dylan was insecure. He said,
mm,
Bob, it's your best ever." Phil would say this kind of stuff. It's great. Don't worry about it. It's going to be terrific. 3 weeks later, you get another call from Dylan. Bob, I'm telling you, it's a great, great album. Then Phil comes to me after Christmas, the beginning of the year. We were waiting for the album to come out. It was supposed to come out at the beginning of January. He says, Glenn, I got some bad news. I said, what happened? He said, Dylan decided at the last minute to go back into a studio in Minneapolis and re-record half the album. I had to take the razor blade and I had to take out the tunes that we recorded and put in the ones from Minneapolis. And that was what it was a little bit of a heartbreak that that a lot of those songs. But now,
yeah,
because we cut those acetates, we cut discs. Then they got bootlegged. Now they're out on the bootleg series,
yeah.
and so people can hear the original stuff that we did. And Phil was. People think that Phil Ramone produced that. He did not produce that. There was no producer. John Hammond showed up at the studio. But didn't really say that much because he didn't say that much to Dylan. But Phil, this legendary Lifetime Achievement, Grammy Award winning producer and engineer, was afraid
to
to
tell him
say to Bob,
to
"Your
stop.
buttons are hitting the guitar." So
You
to,
forget to tell him.
so
That's
he
why
could
they're
have
there.
said, there could have been raw, but you didn't have to hear the clacking of the buttons,
Yeah, yeah.
but Phil was too scared
You had to tell him. But
to
there's
say,
something about that to me, I don't know, being a fan,
yeah,
I don't mind it, but I can understand people want perfection,
right,
and they hear that and they say, "Well, that's
right,
bad."
right,
They pull it out,
yeah,
but sometimes, like, the take is so good in terms of its intention
right,
that the
and
buttons
the
don't
intensity,
matter.
right.
They actually like, it's actually, like, when I hear it, it's like, I like it better no matter what. You
I love that. I love hearing
I just think it's just a better version. It's
right,
like, I just love I listen to it all the time because
yeah.
as a
It's
songwriter, just
very
the depth
direct.
of the way he sang it and
Yeah,
that voice.
yes,
Because that voice he uses on that album is another variation of a voice that he uses,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, that voice is kinda not Nashville Skyline, but it's not what he was doing with the band.
No, no.
It's not what he was doing on Blonde on Blonde.
Right,
Like, he
right.
would change his voice.
Yeah, he was a trickster, he was
Yeah,
his own kind of, David Bowie, right? He was had a
yeah.
lot of different personas, and, you see him on that Rolling Thunder review with the makeup
Oh,
on his
yeah,
face and the
yeah, the
hat on,
mask.
he was intense,
Yeah, I love that stuff too. Yeah,
but,
that stuff is unbelievable.
not there's a scene in the movie, spoiler alert, it's not that big of a deal, where, Joan Baez says to him, "You're kind of an asshole." And he says, "Yeah, I am," right? And it's true. But for an artist to be that
Candid.
not that courageous, you
You
kind of
gotta
have to
be
be.
you gotta be a jerk, you know?
Right.
I mean, and if
Exactly.
you think about, like, people talking about, Miles Davis,
Oh,
Prince,
yeah.
yeah, they people will get in there and say, "Well, yeah, these guys, like, they treated me what." Well, you got a vision, you're gonna tick people off,
Right.
but you
That's right.
go and do something that's not standard,
Right.
people are gonna be like, say, "Oh, that's not you're not supposed to do that."
Right.
Then people are gonna say, "Well, what are you doing?" And they
Right.
think you're doing it wrong because they think they know better. It's like anytime you go out and you put yourself on the cutting edge or like you're on the precipice,
Yeah.
and that's what happens when Dylan just put himself out there
That's right.
and he's doing something that hadn't been really done.
Right. Right.
Just it's significant, and I think that's why Hendrix, yeah, like, understood it, because
Yeah.
he had a big affinity for him.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Anytime I
Yeah.
ever, in terms of like his lyrical content and his
Yeah.
delivery of it.
Yeah. Anybody, if you're it's you gotta if you, two geniuses will recognize each other.
Yeah, it just happens. But I think the people need to understand, like, every human being has the potential
Right.
to do that, but you stop yourself.
That's
So
right.
many people stop themselves. I'm glad that you have this www.school.com heart finders, because I think what you're going to do with people who are hurting is
Yes.
to get them to actually, look at that looking glass self and actually admit and release and give permission to live, right?
And to make a contribution and to create what they are meant to create, whatever that thing is, and whatever the life is that they're meant to lead, and whatever their best self is. We all have that thing that we're meant to be. There's a word called entelechy that Aristotle invented, which is that which we're meant to be. Within the acorn is the mighty oak tree, and if you give the acorn the proper sunlight, soil, and water, it'll become that oak tree. So it's the same thing with us. Each one of us has something that we're meant to be. You're doing your thing. This is what you're meant to be. This is what I'm meant to be. This is what I'm doing. And my mission is to help people unleash their full potential and to become exactly what they're meant to be.
Well, I will end at that because we do have another show coming up. This was such a great show to talk about some really cool moments that, in music history, and the fact that you're a therapist and helping, men who have a lot of damage today, need to get the help and actually give themselves the permission structure to actually, you see this podcast and you feel this way, you feel like you need to talk to somebody. Now, you can check this out. Check out that link. It'll be fully clickable. We do recommend people check out the links of the people we talk to. If there's anything in this episode that really spoke to you in terms of how you think you could get some help or talk to somebody, I think that this is an opportunity for people to check that out. But I
Yeah, this
want
is
to
an
thank you.
online course. I really want to thank you for having me, Phantom. It's been a great pleasure. I love doing this. It's so much fun, and especially to talk to somebody who really knows the stuff and is a great appreciator. So this has been a lot of fun for me.
Well, thank you. Great fun for me because I'm a Dylan crazy. So we talked a lot of cool stuff.
Perfect. It's perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. Have
All
a good
right.